So welcome to the Untitled podcast. Thank you for joining us. Remember to leave your egos at the door. Today, a special guest with us, Phil Sofield. Phil, what's your middle name?
Oh, it is Edward.
Philip Edward Sofield.
It's kind of regal, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like two kings, isn't it?
Right.
King Edward, King Philip. I've got two first names, so can't really say anything. So Phil actually got this episode sponsored for us today, and if you would like to, you can go ahead and share the sponsor of the day.
Yeah, the requested sponsor of the day is actually rain. It gets you wet, even when you don't want to be.
There you go. Rain. Sometimes you need some rain, but rarely do you want to be stuck in it. So I'll give a little introduction for Phil, but you guys know how I like to do this. I'd rather you just get to know him as we kind of do the podcast. But I met Phil, we really actually only met maybe about last July. Like we knew of each other, but didn't really know each other.
Right.
I went on a missions trip with your wife. And then when we came back, you guys came over for the 4th of July. And then we really didn't hang out until after that. But that was about the first time I really knew who you were at that point. And we got to know each other a little bit, and we realized that we both had the old ADHD. And when you start meeting other people and you start realizing, hey, I'm not on the TISM scale. I've just got a little bit of quirkiness, and you start making friends with other people who got a little quirk to them as well. And when I started getting to know Phil, I realized, dude, this guy's been through some shit. And that's the best way I could really put it. And I thought, we kind of got along, and I thought he would be a great person to talk to about some certain topics that we'll get into here. But I don't necessarily want to over-introduce him, because the whole idea of Untitled is that it's the ordinary becomes extraordinary. So, something that I've been telling people, because a lot of people ask, like, what's the point of the podcast? Like, what's the topic of the podcast? And really, it all comes down to the mind, body, and spirit thing, like working on your health in those three areas of your life, because all three areas of your life fit into there. But when you see somebody like Joe Rogan and they're doing a podcast, he's talking to extraordinary people. And he makes them seem relatable, and he makes them seem somewhat ordinary. And my purpose in this is to do the opposite, is to take ordinary, everyday people and show you how extraordinary they are, how resilient we are as human beings, regardless of the circumstances that we're in. So, Phil is just a guy. He's a special guy, at least special to me, special to other people. But like at the end of the day, we're all just ordinary people going through our life, and some people get propped up as being extraordinary, and that's awesome. But my job, my purpose in this is just to show you how extraordinary we all are. So, Bill, pumped to have you here today. Give me a 30-second intro. Like, what would you, if you were introducing yourself to somebody, what would you tell them about you, just so they could have a general idea of who you are, what you do?
Yeah. I've really got two halves to myself. I've got my ADD self, all right, that I fully and completely embrace at home and with friends and family, and this guy. And then I've got, as my wife calls it, work Phil, all right?
Work Phil.
Yeah, work Phil. Sometimes we like work Phil, sometimes we don't like work Phil. There's a side to me that has a level of professionalism and such that I'm dressed for at the moment, but my mind's not there. All right, it's like I've got a split personality right now. All right, and that's how I live my life. Whatever circumstance I'm in, that kind of or side of my personality tends to come out. I've been told that there's work Phil, there's obsessed Phil, there's ADD Phil, there's a lot of different Phils out there. So the Phil that's here today is just here to talk with a friend and just talk about life. Might be a little bit of work Phil that comes out, might be a little bit of ADD. Well, I expect a lot of ADD Phil to
That's
show
what
up
we're here
today.
for.
Yeah,
A lot of
exactly.
ADD on this.
It's entertaining if nothing else.
If we can stay on topic for longer than 2 minutes and even remember what the other person said, we'll be in a good place.
Cheers
this
to
will be a
that.
5-star podcast. So Phil, you own and operate a company called GBB Consulting, correct?
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so GBB Consulting actually was created after just a low point in time after getting fired from a job by my best friend. Matt, we'll get into that here in a few minutes. But after getting fired from a job that my best friend hired me for, and a little hiatus, God presented some opportunities for me to start a business and work with companies and individuals to improve their businesses. And it's worked out fantastically. I love what I get to do. It's been 4.5 years, going on 5 years now of being self-employed. And, my wife is a part of the business now. And there's just been a ton of growth there. But the growth isn't just in the business either. I found that the growth has actually come in my life personally, and in my wife's life, and the people that I've been able to help support. It's not about the business side of things per se. It's about growing people.
Yeah. And, when you first were telling me a little bit about that, I was curious where you came up with the GBB, and it was the good, better, or best. And I really liked that idea. And you said something to me when you were telling me about it, like, we settle so often for good enough, and why do we settle for good enough when there's something better? There is a best option. Like, there is better for us, but we as human beings are just willing to settle for good enough. And it's not just in business, although in business, good enough seems to work for people, but in life in general. And that really kind of hit me, like that idea of like where we're settling, where we're just saying, okay, it's good enough, and why we do that, thinking about it so much. And I loved that idea that you came up with, like good, better, or best.
Right. And it's really the mantra of the business is that we take what people or an organization is doing good, the good side of things, and we want to make that better. But we don't want to stop there. We want to continually make it better until it's the best that it can be. We never want to stop growing. We never want to stop improving. We always want to strive for that next level. And whether that be finances, whether that be, personal knowledge, leadership skills, anything of that nature, we don't ever want to become stagnant. We don't ever want to become stagnant. And it talks about that in 2 Peter, and where it talks about continually becoming better and better. And that's just something that has been a part of my life, at least in the last 7 years or so. Because I can think back to a period of my life where that was not the case, especially when you get to the point of trying to just survive. And a lot of us are just trying to survive. We're just trying to get through today, and sometimes not even today, sometimes just the next hour. How do I get through the next hour? Or how do I make it past 2:45 today? All right. How do I make it past that point in the day today? And that survival, the minute you get put into that survival mode, you stop thinking beyond the blinders that you have on that's causing that survival instinct. You stop thinking about how I can be better. And you're just hyper focused on that one or two things that you are that's causing either dread or worry in your life. And I try to help people and organizations look beyond and past that tunnel vision that they have, or that one fear that they have, or the thing that's bit them in the past, and look into something way beyond that on, hey, there is a world outside and beyond the fear and worry that you have. And sometimes that fear and worry that you have can't be overcome until you have somebody help you look outside that tunnel vision that you might have. And that's hard. That's hard. And that's
Yeah.
personal, business, friendships, relationships, and all kind. Like I said, in this growth that we've had from a business standpoint, I've grown personally and worked with people personally in their growth as well, with these same concepts, these same ideas, because they apply in all walks of life.
Yeah. I think there there is a large portion of our culture, our society, that is stuck in this stress mode, this fight or flight mode, and like there's science behind it. Like we have two aspects of kind of our stress response. We have a sympathetic and a parasympathetic nervous system. And when you're in this stress response, it's that fight or flight. And then when you're in the parasympathetic, it's that rest and recover. And so many of us are just struggling and feeling so beat down all the time by work or life or just the circumstances that you're in, whether they're something you created for yourself or something that you've unfortunately stumbled into. And it's hard to ever feel like you're getting that rest and recover time, but it's crucial. It's vital. Like one of the number one killers, they call it a silent killer, is stress. And it's
Right.
because how much it impacts your body. If your body's always in this heightened state, dumping adrenaline or norepinephrine into your system, and epinephrine making you feel like you're always on edge, well, when are you ever going to get good sleep? When are you ever going to actually relax and recover and feel like you can be at your best? And that's why you're settling for good enough, because it's like that's all you have in the tank.
Right.
And it's not just with business, but like that idea with the business is a beautiful idea because it parallels so well with where so many people are in life. That's a tough place, because I would love to be like, hey everybody, here's 5 tips on how you get unstressed, but the hell if I know. Like,
Right.
I'm stressed all the time. I can have everything seeming to go well in life and then have a day like today and a day like yesterday. And like, to kind of expand on that, like we have to make a terrible decision today to put our dog down because of cancer. And it's like it's just this place where no matter how much I try to relax and feel like I'm doing the right thing, I'm just always in this place of feeling so heightened and so torn about this. And there's people that feel that way all the time because of where they're at in life, where
Right.
what they're walking into. And I love that I find it interesting that you were able to kind of go in and see these things. It's like we do similar things in consulting, but you convincing someone that they can make more money with a few different changes, and me trying to convince someone they can lose a few pounds with a few small changes, the approach on it is very different, because I have to call someone fat in order to get them to change. You just have to tell them you're successful, just you can be more successful.
No, I still call them fat.
Yeah.
All right.
There is probably a lot of fat businesses and that unhealthy businesses.
Right. Right. It's interesting. Actually, I had to call a business fat this week. Actually, I was in Chicago this week, and we had a meeting with two different departments that were in the meeting that both control part of the destiny of the facility. And about halfway through the meeting, after looking at everybody's responses and such, I could see that there was an unhealthy tension between these departments. And I just called it out. And I said, look, you guys, and I've never met these people before. All right. This is the first time I've ever met these people in this room. They've known me for all of 31 minutes and 25 seconds. All right. And
got to be pretty bad if you can read them that quick.
Right.
30 minutes and you've already got a pretty good layout of what the heck's going on.
Right. And so I'm seeing the tension between these departments, and I called it out right then is, look, we're going to create an intermediary. We're going to create something between you and the thing that you think is causing all of your problems. And guess what that intermediary is going to be? That gets to be me. All right. I'm going to be the intermediary between you and what you think your problem is and what you think is going to be tearing you down and making your life harder. All right. And what that's going to look like is something that stands between you and that other side. All right. Is going to look like some sort of list or some sort of inanimate function that just keeps you completely separated from that other side. All right. That other group, that other department isn't causing your pain, isn't causing your suffering. All right. The situation is. All right. And we can look at those situations just as information, unbiased, unemotional information. All right. And I'm going to help you do that. And I'm going to stand in that gap, stand between, and we will make certain that at the end of your day, at the end of your work week, at the end of you completing your goals list and tasks, you know that you've been successful in and of yourself, and not despite another group of people, not despite another situation, all right, that you have control over your own destiny. And that's one of the things that I try to do with people and groups, is make sure that they understand that we're trying to give you control of your own destiny back, because that's something that really everyone's looking for. A lot of people feel like they're not in control of their own lives. They're not in control of what is happening to them. We feel like we're not in control, and that's something that, for whatever reason, there's a large portion of us, especially people, like Zach, like myself, that we want to have a little bit of control over something, at least in some area of our lives. And there's people out there that feel like they have no control over anything. And I try to give that back to people. Here's, a little thing I can control. It goes back to that whole concept of making your bed every day, right? How many self-help books say, hey, go make your bed, so you've, completed a task and at the beginning of the day, and you feel successful? Well, the main reason behind that is that one task, that one thing, is something that you have control over. It shows that you have something that you can take action on and you can complete, and you can put a check mark in your column. And there's so many people out there in the business world, so many people out there in just the world in general, that just don't feel like they have any control over anything in their lives.
Yeah. And that in all reality kind of is one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you about stuff and kind of have you share some stuff, is because I think we all are grasping at control, but with control, the other side of that is trust, and trusting
Right.
trusting yourself, trusting people that you relinquish amounts of control to, trusting that things are going to move in a certain direction despite or in contrast to like what you would think or how things have been going. And I know that for us, when we went on a hike one time, and we had been out there for probably like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I remember we came to this little area where we had to cross the creek, and we were on a little tiny switchback, and we just stopped. And I asked you something, and I said, how can you trust anybody given everything that you've gone through in your life? Like, how can you instill the smallest amount of trust in anyone given all of the crap that has happened between you and different people in your life in different situations, where it's like you've had people so close to you betray your trust multiple times? How do you even get to a place? Because this is something that I personally really struggle with, is like, I think these two words go hand in hand, but like trust and forgiveness, and like letting things, I don't want to say letting things go, but forgiving somebody and trusting them to not necessarily act like somebody else, or forgiving another person and then not projecting that action onto every relationship that you have moving forward. And like, really, when it comes to what you do for a living, is you're asking these people to trust you in that you're going to give them a blueprint, give them a plan that's going to move them towards the desired goal that they have in mind for their business. And they may not even be clear on that, in which case you have to help them figure out what they want and then ask them to trust you on it. When we were talking and I asked you that, you said something that I still wrestle with. You said, I don't have to trust them. I just have to trust God. And it's something I struggle with because I feel like I'm out here in Troy, Missouri, and I'm struggling to trust God because I feel like He's the one who brought me out here, and I hate it. And I hate every minute of it. So why would I want to put more trust into somebody that I feel like hasn't proven themselves to be trustworthy in my life? But it's like that, just that idea of trust in general. How do you even begin to get people to trust you that you can actually help them in this? Like, if you don't have any track record, you don't have any, like, there's that first client that you have to land without any proven success, any concept. But like, how do you enter into that world of trust me to solve your problem?
Yeah.
Relinquish some control to me.
Yeah. That's really hard to do, actually. And that actually comes down to one main thing. It is operating out of love. I know that's a weird thing to say when we're talking about business, but love shows itself in a way that nobody can ever ignore it. When you show love, and what I mean by that, I actually mean from the book of Corinthians style love, actually caring, actually enduring, actually going through the different pieces there. When you actually show that sincerely, it gets people's attention because people aren't used to it nowadays. People aren't used to let's hyper focus in on enduring for a moment. All right, people aren't used to getting beat up and going back and getting beat up more and going back, maybe being told no again, over and over and over again. So when you endure something in the business world, sometimes that's enough to get just a little bit of faith from them to allow them to take that first step that you're suggesting. The endurance is just the first one, that I mentioned, but there's so many others. Humbleness, for example, is another one. All right. I never go into a situation or relationship opportunity thinking that I know everything that's happening. Most of the time, I do have a good understanding before I walk in there because I don't work with clients that do things that I haven't seen before. So there's a little bit of prior knowledge, but I never assume that I know what's going on. And I ask questions, and I make certain that the clients, the people that I'm working with, know that I respect their knowledge, I respect their authority, and that I'm humble. And that is not something that people are used to. For example, I've been doing audio, video lighting for, golly, I mean, I was literally standing on a milk carton, as a kid, 10 years old when I started doing this. And, but I tell you what, every single time I walk into a situation where there's somebody working alongside of me or I'm working with somebody, I make certain that they understand that I'm here to learn. Even if you're working with me, under me, helping me out in a situation, you might have something that I don't know that I'm going to be better for afterwards. It's that continual improvement thing we were talking about before. That goes so hand in hand with the humbleness. And I can honestly say the clients that I go work with, I learn as much from them, each client that I go to, as I'm pouring into their lives, into their businesses. And it's this reciprocal program of I'm learning and becoming better. And because of that, they become better and learn more because I can take the talents that I have available that God's given me and just reiterate what they're doing good already into a form that lets them grow into a better version of themselves. It just takes a little bit of that love to get to that point of partnership. And that's really where it all starts. And I can honestly say that has not been a part of my life for a very long time. That showing people love concept, golly, maybe 6-7 years, like I said, during that period of personal growth. And to understand that, we got to take a step back in the time machine. All right. If I had some like time machine noise, I would, do it. But, yeah, I could see the wheels turning over there. But
go ahead.
Yep.
If you want to take a step back to talk a little bit about that, feel free to.
Yeah. So, I mean, you got to take a step back to understand how crazy this is. The concepts that I'm spitting out here. In my life, 10 years ago, I hated people. And I say hated, and I mean it. I could not stand people 10 plus years ago.
I hated them 10 minutes ago.
Well, I'm people too. So we'll see what happens in the next 10 minutes.
Not all people.
All right, right.
Just like everyone in Troy.
Well, you're right. Right.
I'm sorry, people of Troy. I really don't hate you guys. I despise you. I loathe you. No, I don't. It's more the mindset of the Trojans, the people of Troy. Go ahead and take a step back and share with us, because like you're out here out of who the hell knows why either. Like, you grew up on the coast just like me, just East Coast, West Coast. You kind of moved around, so like for you to end up out here makes no flipping sense either. So go ahead, floor is yours.
Right. So I grew up on a sunny beach down in Florida. All right. Cocoa Beach, Florida at that. One of those places, one of the like 3 places that Troy, Missouri knows about for vacations. All right. You've got Orange Beach, you've got Cocoa Beach, Florida, and you've got cruises. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's the only vacation destinations Troy knows about.
And you're driving to all of them because, flying is, I don't know why people out here don't fly.
Right.
They don't drive. Like, why would I want to sit in a car for 18 hours when I can be there in 4 hours?
Right.
I hate it.
Right. And
I get so frustrated. Can you guys hear the frustration I have with Midwesterners? I just want to smack them all in the back of the head.
It's true. It's true.
With a little West Coast love.
So I grew up and lived in, the vacation destination, or one of the vacation destinations in the country. And now I'm in Troy, Missouri. And, we'll take a small step back, and then we're going to take a bigger, further step back. But long story short, I went through a divorce. My first wife and I had a son. His name's Charlie. He is amazing. And through that divorce, I had to prove that I could take a job that didn't involve traveling, because I was traveling a lot at the time. And through that, I was offered a position eventually here in Troy by a really good friend of mine. And I ended up taking it. Even though I ended up proving to the courts that I could get a job that would allow me to not travel as much, I still lost primary time sharing with my son. So even though I did everything they asked me to do, I got a job, or showed that I could get a job that involved traveling less, if not at all. They still awarded primary time sharing to my ex-wife. And we'll get into that here in a few minutes. But I see the smile on your face. You know where we're going. We're going to hit that one hard. All right.
We can do whatever you want. I'm not gonna force you to talk about anything that is touchy. But obviously, it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, it's interesting, entertaining, and actually, at this point, almost comical. But so that was a really low point in my life. That was, right before that 7 year period, 7 years ago and such. And I ended up moving up here to Troy, Missouri in December. All right. I moved up here and it is snaining outside. As I'm
Snaining?
snaining,
What
snow
is it?
rain, snow
I believe
rain.
they call that sleet out here
Yeah,
or
I'm from
something.
Florida. Remember Cocoa Beach? It's snain.
We didn't have weather in San Diego.
That's true. That's true. Crazy thing. I was actually born in San Diego, so I grew up in Florida, but it's crazy. I know what he's talking about. It's 85 and sunny year round in San Diego. So
Yeah. So I gave you the California Cup.
right. Oh yeah, I just noticed that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Took care of you.
But I moved to Troy, Missouri in the middle of the snain December. It was miserable. It was absolutely horrendous. I wanted beaches and sunshine, and I'm here with gray skies for months on end.
Oh, yeah. We get a lot of gray.
It's the primary color for 6 months.
That and camouflage.
Right.
Your choice.
Right. But it was a horrible season of my life. I started drinking, started hanging out with what I thought were a group of friends that just promoted more drinking and crazy activity and such. And it was a really low point in my life personally. Professionally, it was great. I had a team that I was managing. It was a fantastic opportunity. I was learning a lot. The team was growing. The business was growing. And then, there was a point in time that my expertise and my opinions just stopped mattering at the business. And I'll be honest, not feeling like I had control, not feeling like I could make better of my own destiny, created a sense of kind of spite or feelings in my life that I'd never really experienced before professionally. And at that point, I didn't think I could make life better for me or the team that I was leading. And then came down the hammer of, hey, let's have that conversation. And I just got let go after a year and a half. They moved me up here to Troy, Missouri, and then said, oh, you can figure out the rest now that you're up here and kind of seated in. So that was a rough point. That was a really rough point to be brought up here by a good friend and to just be let go. That's hard. That's hard to trust anybody or anything at that point. But what's crazy is I could have had another job, the next day. I had enough contacts. I've traveled the country. I was a consultant before this, before that. I could have had another job the next day. And I remember, this is shortly after starting going to church at Journey. I remember God clearly speaking to me and saying, hey, you need to sit in it for a minute. That was what he said to me. Sit in it for a minute. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about, God? I'm
Dr. Seuss.
Right. That's exactly it. God does speak in riddles. All right. Let's be honest. So, yeah.
I'm gonna hold my tongue.
Yeah. But sit in it for a minute. And I'm wondering, what the heck does that mean? More clearly, don't go get another job. Okay. So what did I do? Oh, I went on vacation. God said, don't get a job. I went on vacation. Ended up traveling a little bit. Went to see some friends down in Charlotte. Went down to the beach in Florida and hung out there and got some sunshine back and and such, and all the while just ignoring the fact that the bank account is starting to go down.
Yeah.
3 weeks in, I've got about a week and a half, 2 weeks of finances left, and I remember thinking, all right, well, I'm sitting in it, but I ain't gonna have anything to sit on here in a few minutes. All right, and no sooner I have that thought of, hey, finances are gonna run out soon. I get a call from my old boss while I'm in Charlotte visiting friends, and he's like, hey, would you like to come do some contract work for me? We've got this client. They want to do some continual improvement stuff. And there's really nobody internally that can handle this level of work. And this is my old boss from when I was doing consulting before I moved to, to Troy.
Mhm.
And so it was when I was doing all the traveling and stuff. And I said, yeah, let me think about it. And we talked a little bit more. And as I'm walking into a Chick-fil-A parking lot, or walking into Chick-fil-A from the parking lot, phone to my ear, he throws out, "We'll pay you $1,000 a day." Like, do I say yes now? Do you need my blood? What do you need at this point to make this like real right now?
Yeah.
Throwing those kind of numbers out there, it's like, yes, and where do I need to be in the next 5 minutes? I'll flap my wings and get there.
Yeah.
I didn't tell him that, all right, but at the time, that's what was running through my head. And I stopped and prayed about it, obviously, in the holy Chick-fil-A parking lot there.
The Lord's chicken.
The Lord's chicken, right? And God told me, this is what I had you waiting for. If you hadn't been waiting, if you hadn't trusted in me, if you hadn't gone on vacation, you wouldn't have gotten this call. All right. This is what I've had you waiting for.
That is interesting. So, what year are we in now, timeline wise? What year are we at?
This is 4.5 years ago.
Okay.
So, end of 2018, somewhere in 2018, 2019. So, somewhere in there.
So you take this job. Is it a traveling job? Is it?
Yeah.
Where is it at? Where is it located?
So this is a single contract. All right. Mind you, GBB didn't exist at this point. It's hey, we've got 3 months worth of work for you. All right. You're going to be an independent contractor. We will pay you per day that you're gone, working with this client, consulting with them. And it's basically 3 months worth of guaranteed work. Looking at probably somewhere around $25,000 to $30,000 across 3 months, which is fantastic based on where I was at the moment. Of, hey, your bank account's looking pretty low. So, but no guarantees of anything past that. Just, hey, we got some work for you, and just do it, and that's that. But what's crazy is when I started working with this client, who was an absolute mess, they started realizing that there's some benefit in me hanging around. And even though it was a kind of a 3-month original time frame, I still do work with this client today. I'm actually going to be there next week for the whole week. So just through that, fostering that relationship and such, we've created a 4.5, almost 5-year partnership now. And it's an ongoing, trusting relationship, and it's been fantastic. But that's what happened after I started doing this contract work. Is my old boss realized that, hey, there's some benefit here. I don't have to deal with Phil's crap because he's his own contractor. He's just a contractor. And we get to make money together, and he just does his own thing. So it was a win-win across the board there. And they started throwing other contracts at me. And as month after month progressed, there was more work than I knew what to do with. I started doing some work remotely, and then I started realizing I'm sitting in the St. Louis airport getting ready to go on site someplace for a consulting endeavor. And I'm sitting there realizing this thing needs to be legitimate. Up to this point, it's probably been 6 months or something like that, 9 months, somewhere around there. Up to this point, it's just been Phil going and doing things. And so I just started reading my Bible, writing things down, praying to God. My flight got delayed a little bit, so I had some time. And, God spoke to me about GBB Consulting, good, better, best. I stumbled across the verse in Peter, 2 Peter 5. Oh, I should know this. This is our company's verse. It's on my business card. So when I give you my business card, you'll have the exact verse. But
maybe that's my problem. I don't have a company verse.
Yeah, well, that
I have a quote by Confucius.
Well, what's the quote?
Everybody has 2 lives, and the second begins when you realize you only have one.
Oh, man.
That'll really F your day up.
And we're supposed to stay on task?
Yeah, that'll mess with you. But
right.
1 Peter, 2 Peter 5, something.
Yep, 2 Peter 5 just talks about basically continually improving. And that's where the good, better, best came from, right there. I have no clue where those exact words came from, but it's funny. I pulled out my laptop at the time and started doing research on did the name exist in the corporate database records and all that kind of stuff, and realized that there's only one other real record, and it's a garbage company, which is, that was encouraging. Hey, here's your new name. It's also associated with a really big garbage company. That gave me some encouragement.
That's a beautiful thing. Kind of a garbage company.
Right.
Go in and clean up.
That's exactly
garbage.
it. That's exactly it.
So how do you determine then if it's actually a God thing or just a good thing? How did you actually determine if what you were feeling was God or just what you wanted it to be? Because this is something I struggle with, and I think a lot of people struggle with. And I grew up in a Southern Baptist kind of environment where, if God talks to you, you're crazy. God only talks to weirdos.
Right.
So when I hear people say, God spoke to me this, God spoke to me that, when I went from Southern Baptist, being raised that way, to Evangel University, which was this Assemblies of God, hyper spiritual thing. And, I got people telling me, God told me to, start wearing a feathered hat. And I'm like, dude, what the F? God doesn't give 2 shits about your feathered hat.
No.
And if he does, whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what to do with that. But there's this whole split in God is a figurehead, kind of how I grew up. And God's there, but he's in the waiting. He's just kind of working in the background. To God cares about, my shoelaces being tied. So he made sure. God gave me a great parking spot when I went to Target. And it's there's such a big contrast in that someone like me, when you grow up one way and then you're exposed to something that's the complete opposite of that, typically you find yourself either running hard towards one or the other. And I'm always the type of person where everything's gray. There's no such thing as black and white. So it's got to be somewhere in the middle. But for you personally, the way you grew up, you have your own interpretation of things. So how do you determine, Phil, not necessarily how everyone should, but sit on this for a minute. This is the job I had for you in the Chick-fil-A parking lot, GBB Consulting in the airport. Like, how do you determine those are Phil ideas or those are God ideas for you personally?
Yeah, that's 100% valid. And just like everything else, you got to
And I'm not asking from a place of I doubt it. I'm asking from a place of like, explain it to me, because I'm an idiot and you guys are all idiots probably. I'm just kidding. You guys are all geniuses.
Troy, Missouri. All right.
And no one from Troy's listening to this. What's a podcast?
We love you, Troy. We
put
do.
it on the U vision.
Well, I love you now, Troy. All right. Didn't always love you.
Just get some better food.
Hey. There's a Chick-fil-A truck that comes to Troy every once in a while now.
Yeah.
It's still just a trailer full of chicken, though. So
the old chicken trailer. But yeah.
So circling back around,
yes.
the ADD moment. Yes. So you got to understand a little bit of background, and then I can give you that little bit.
That's what we're here for. We're here for all the background.
Right. So I grew up. How far back do I go?
Let's go back to when you were born. What hospital was it at?
Chula Vista. Vista Memorial Hospital there.
There you go.
Yeah, San Diego.
I lived in Chula Vista for a majority of my young childhood.
Yep.
Which means cute view.
So now that I've answered that question, we can get to the real question at hand here. But I grew up around my grandmother, who was Catholic and such. We had a duplex, and my grandmother was on one side, and my mom and stepdad were on the other. But she had a Catholic background, and I grew up like learning how to memorize things and know what you're supposed to know, and that kind of stuff. And then when we moved inland to the mainland side, 10 minutes away from the beach, I started going to a Baptist church.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Just a nice, lovely, cozy church called Westboro Baptist, you know.
If you don't know the backstory on Westboro, go do some research.
Yeah, they're fun.
Anywho, that is not where I went. I just want to be clear. All right. I do want to be clear. Actually, I
do not want to be associated with those people.
Right.
Do not lump me in with them.
Right. You can lump me in with Troy. Just don't lump me in with them. Yeah. All right. I'd rather be lumped in with Troy.
That's how bad it is, people. If you would rather be known as living in Troy, Missouri than going to Westboro Baptist.
Right. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
There's a lot wrong with that.
There is.
There's a few things. It makes me think of the Seinfeld episode where they're talking about their like gay coworker.
Right.
It's like, not that there's anything wrong with that.
I'm glad you got the reference.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I grew up a Seinfeld kid.
Yeah, I did too.
I love Seinfeld.
It was Seinfeld, Friends, and whatever else was on that night. Every single day in my household was on every single day.
It's probably like Will and Grace or something.
Yeah, something like that. But it was always less important than Friends and Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So
you're at a Baptist church now.
Yeah, it's a great, loving Baptist church, and it's where I grew up learning how to serve. That was the biggest thing that I learned there, amongst a lot of other things. But I learned how to serve there, and how the service heart really just grows you quite a bit. But I played this Christian good boy role for a long time, said all the right things, did all the right things, made people think that I had my act together, when really anytime anybody wasn't looking, I was out partying or drinking or other things.
Yeah, you were Baptist.
That's exactly it.
I grew up the same way. Let me show you what's in this hand. Well, I'm doing everything with this hand.
That's exactly it.
Good old Baptist.
And it wasn't until I moved away for college, and I went to visit a church in Jacksonville. I think it's called South Point was the church that I went to. And Sunday service was fairly normal. It seemed like a really cool place, a large church. Then I went to like the first Wednesday evening service after I went there. and these people started like speaking in tongues
Whew,
and started
that'll get
talking
you.
about the Holy Spirit, and there were like people running around up and down the aisles, and
Yeah.
like I'm flipping out as Baptist boy over here.
Oh yeah.
All right, I am freaking out trying to realize like what the heck's going on. There better not be snakes in that box. All right, if there's snakes, I'm out. All right,
If there was snakes, I probably would have been all into it.
right.
I'm a snake guy.
And I immediately, after the service is over, I get into my car, I get back to my apartment, and I called my old pastor back in Florida at the Baptist church, or down in Cocoa Beach at the Baptist church. I'm like, dude, you got to explain, help me know what's going on here. It's like, yeah, it can be real, but what you went through doesn't quite sound legit. So I got some real like true level Baptist perspective there.
Yeah.
Not Baptist perspective, but like, hey, this can be a real thing. It just does talk about it in the Bible and such, but the level of extreme that you're explaining seems a little off. Needless to say, I did not go back to South Point Church there in Jacksonville. One freak out moment was enough. So I guess I say all that to say, I have a level of skepticism that has been brought into my life for a lot of different reasons. Not only just having grown up in my teen years in a Baptist world, but having some weird stuff happen in church environments a couple of times. But that all being said, it's not about just hearing the voice of God or hearing that little voice or a voice in your head. That's not where it ends. It comes in confirmation of what you're hearing. It's not about hearing something, all right? Because my ADD brain tells me some weird stuff all the flipping time.
Yeah.
I get some left field thoughts that are out there all the time. But I tell you what, the ones that line up with the scripture that I've been reading that week or that month, the ones that line up with pastor's sermon the week before, or even more freaky, the week after, all right? Those are the voices that I listen to in my head, the ones that have confirmation standing behind them. And it's that bit of confirmation, and you've got to look for it too. You've got to be praying about it, writing it down, thinking about it. Otherwise, you'll miss it. All right? Because there's so many thoughts that go through my head. If I don't write them down, if I don't think about them continually, if I don't think about the things that God has put in front of me continually, I won't see that confirmation that comes later. I won't see the connection that God's trying to make between, hey, last Tuesday at 3:15 p.m., I told you this, all right? But 5 days later, 6 days later on Sunday, all right, remember what Pastor said from the pulpit up there? You remember what he said? Does that line up with what I told you last Tuesday? You see what I'm doing here? You see what I'm doing here? I'm trying to set you up on your next path, your next thing that I want you to do. It's all about that confirmation. And specifically when it came to GBB Consulting, it was the acceptance of the name and the showing of that verse in 2 Peter. All right. And I can't remember which one was worse, which one was first, whether it was the name that came before researching 2 Peter or whether 2 Peter drove the name to come into existence. But either way, there was a confirmation there, not only to, hey, this is something the scripture talks about, the continual improvement side of things, but beyond that, it went even further as far as, talking with the people that were in my life at the time and saying, hey, this is the concept, this is the idea, and just realizing that this is something that there's a need for out there that people relate to because there's a desire. So for me, that was whether that confirmation for that name was directly from God or not. I got a confirmation piece that was beyond just what I was thinking in the ADD moment that it came out. There's always a piece of confirmation beyond just, hey, I heard some little whisper in my head. All right. I got a lot of squirrels running around up there. I don't know which one's whispering in my head at any given time. But without confirmation, without some sort of confirmation in the past, I didn't act. I wouldn't act because, like I said, I don't trust myself or didn't trust myself very much at the time. So for me, to circle back around to your question, for me, it's not knowing 100% that God spoke to me. It's literally looking for confirmation or even going as far as challenging God for confirmation. All right. When you look at, I think it's Ezekiel, right, with the wet ground and the dry ground and such, and so, that's a precedent that God put out there in the scripture, asking for confirmation. All right. I don't think it's him being, he's not stubborn. All right. He's not trying to make this difficult. If we're asking for confirmation for, not out of stubbornness, but out of willingness to listen, but making sure that we're listening to the right voice. Remember, my sheep hear my voice and they understand my voice. Making sure that we're learning what that voice sounds like. And I can say now, and this is more due to spending time at Journey and learning what this growth process looks like. Knowing that voice, knowing which squirrel is talking to me versus knowing when God is talking to me, the more that I've challenged those things and looked for confirmation in those things, the more that voice stands out. The more that voice stands out amongst the others that are in my head. I don't want to make myself sound like a crazy person, but
No, you do.
yeah, I know. It's the truth.
Just keep burying yourself over there.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, trust me, I got a lot more shovelfuls left in me.
It's good. I want you to keep expounding on this. This is a concept I really don't understand at all. So like I'm trying to genuinely take this in, and I appreciate that you are going into the depth that you are, because it's like, hell if I know what God sounds like. Like whenever I think, oh, maybe that was God. Well, if I have to preface it with maybe, then it probably wasn't.
Right.
Sounds like everyone who I talk to, they're very clear on when God's speaking to them. And like when you say something like, yeah, when my sheep hear my voice, they know. Like that idea makes me go back and go like, was I ever hearing anything? Because like I have an experience where it's like there's no other thing than a God thing, is like the best way I could put it. It's metaphysical. It's outside of the explanation of anything that we can explain, but through God or like telepathy or ESP. Like,
Right.
So one of those three things has to be it, and I have to figure out like, well, which one is it? Because it's like God tells me something, or what I think is God tells me something. It's absolutely ludicrous. I keep it to myself. I tell one other person. That person tells me to pray that God confirms it through Megan. Megan comes up with the idea 3 weeks later or so. And it's like, so I never mentioned this to her out loud. I never said this. And then it loops back around to it. So to me, it was like the only experience that I've ever had where I felt like God was directly kind of talking in a situation. But at the end of the day, the part of my brain that doesn't like absolutes goes, well, there could be some other reason. There could be, maybe you did say something.
Right.
Maybe X, Y, or Z. Maybe you were talking in your sleep. like I don't know. So I really struggle with it. And to hear you be so confident in this is very interesting, because when your mind like works like mine and nothing is absolute and nothing is black and white and everything's just a big gray mushy ball, then to hear someone who is confident and can stand in an absolute even when it looks gray, like can
Right.
determine that's black or that's white. It's like your vision is so clear that you can see through what appears to be something for what it truly is. And I like that.
Right.
It's very foreign to me.
Well, I got two things. All right. One, that vision, that clear vision that you just mentioned, it's not much more vision past that first step. It hardly ever is. It's you can imagine the thickest fog that you can ever imagine, but God's giving you one step further of vision available to you, and then you have to take that step. But once you take that step, typically, at least what I've seen in my life, is that a couple more of the next steps start becoming visible. But I can't see step 2, 3, 4, 5 until step 1 has been taken. I can't see how much further the path goes or if it veers to the right or the left until after that first step is taken, at least in my life. And I know I'm kind of speaking in a metaphysical kind of concept here, but hopefully that makes sense, though.
Yeah, that's I want to know your personal side of things. Like,
Right.
I would prefer that because that it makes it real.
Right.
It makes it real when you get to see like a practical application or hear it. So I don't mind it at all. So you put some element of trust in God in. So what you're saying is you put some element of trust in that what you're hearing is God by taking the first step of what you believe to be that, and then further stuff comes down the road.
Right. So I would say 3 or 4 years ago, it was more or less hear God, wait for confirmation, then take the first step. That was kind of the order of operations, if you will, a few years ago. Now it's more or less, hey God, I'm in the middle of this step. Can you give me some confirmation, or how about a spot to land my foot? That would be great. It is more or less the way that it's going nowadays. And I will say that God's revealed that step to me, sometimes just in the nick of time to land that foot on that step. But it's being willing to have faith in myself, knowing that I'm doing the right things daily to know His voice better and feel more confident with those steps. Like, I'll circle it back around to the second thing that strikes close to home. 3 weeks ago, you messaged me and said, "Hey, you want to come on this podcast?" All right, and that was, I'm very happy to be here. I wasn't sure if, after helping you get it all set up, if I would have the opportunity to come on here and talk with you, but this is something I've never done before, and quite frankly, I didn't know if I had anything to offer in a conversation setting like this. But after you offered, the first thing that God told me right there in that minute, in that moment, was, "Hey, you need to talk about trust." Like, okay, that's weird. Okay. And what did I message back to you?
That we were going to talk about trust.
We were going to talk about trust. And what did you message back to me?
That was the idea.
That was the idea. And that knowing what Zach wanted to talk about, all right, had nothing to do with me and him having any pre-conversations or anything like that. We had not talked about that being the purpose of this podcast in general or anything like that. It was a prompting on, hey, I got my confirmation back in 90 seconds on that one that, hey, we're supposed to talk about trust here. When Zach messaged back to me and said, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Now that's a small example. All right. That's a little thing, but it wasn't, I didn't say, hey, do you want to talk about trust? There was no wishy-washiness to it. Hey, we're talking about trust. Oh yeah, that's what we plan on talking about. And we just kind of both went on with our lives. But for me, that was a moment where God proved himself on, hey, this is what I want you to talk about. And guess what? That's also what he wants to talk about. I'm just going to let you get there first. So
it's interesting that that's how you arrived at that. Like, I've kind of stopped asking God's direction on things and stopped asking his opinion on things because it winds me up in places like Troy, Missouri.
Right.
And like after this and then it's like, hey, I want you to move to the Midwest and start a business helping people lose weight. Like, that's kind of the only, it sounds like a very specific direction, but it's like, okay, that's very broad. The Midwest is very large, and how am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to do this through personal training? Am I supposed to do this like in person? Like, what is the concept of this? And having to suss all that out and create a plan to make that happen, it broke me, because it's like I'm then going to God and asking direction, and I'm getting no direction. I'm getting no confirmation. I'm getting no word back at all. So to continue to try to put trust in him, to me, is just insane, because it's like I'm doing the same thing and I'm getting nothing back. So why would I continue to keep going down this path? And the only difference between me and you in that is that you trust that God will provide a confirmation, or that God will provide a step to land on, and I don't. Because
right.
the step that I landed on out here seems a lot like broken glass.
Right.
And so like hearing you talk this out and hearing you speak this through, it's interesting to me, because we do things very similarly, yet we have different understandings or different outcomes based on like that understanding of like what will come. It's like you have this trust that God will provide the step. I don't, so there's nothing to land on.
Right.
You do, and it's like, well, so then this is where it gets into the weird philosophy side of things of
right.
like, where, why is that there for one person and not for another? And that's a whole nother thing for a whole nother time, because that derails everything past it. But like, yeah, the whole thing with like the trust was, it all goes back to that conversation we had in the forest when I was just trying to get to know who you were, because I'm not a very trusting person by nature. So
right.
I keep myself to myself very much. I don't let people in very easily. And then when I realize how I kind of test people is I drop something real stupid on them and I see how they respond. So like, I hit them with some stupid philosophical thing about life. And if they panic, then I know not worth my time to be around, because they can't handle, they can't handle anything deep. And I'm not willing to have a surface level relationship with people anymore.
Right.
And you stood up to the occasion. I was like, okay, Phil's fucking rad.
Let's get the
talk about
nutcracker
this.
out. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Let's get that nutcracker out.
And then you kind of opened up to me about like your first relationship and your best friend, and then your second relationship, and then how you got to know Tabitha and all of these things. And I just remember thinking, how the hell does this guy trust anybody at this point in his life? And it was something that I was really wrestling with, like trusting God. And then your answer is, oh, I just got to trust God and he's going to work it all out. And I'm like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And I was so mad, but I like tried to hide it, because I was like, that's his answer? Really? Out of all the things, that's your answer? The one thing that I don't want to hear? It's like, I'm looking for 2 + 2 = 6 here, and you're telling me, nope, it's got to be 4.
Yeah.
It's got to be 4.
Yep. And you're absolutely right. I I never shy away from a question. I never shy away from a conversation or a topic. Everything's on the table all the time. You never know what you're going to be hit with next uh, from a business standpoint or from a personal relationship standpoint, especially when you're walking in the woods with Zach.
It gets weird out there.
It gets weird.
Not in a weird way.
Not in a weird way.
I mean, we can let it get weird.
No, I won't let it get weird. It's weird enough. We're in Troy, Missouri. The things we see out in the woods. All right.
Did we see anything good out in the woods that day?
No, but
I don't even think we saw a deer.
no, we didn't. We didn't. But anywho,
Even the deer don't want to live in Troy, Missouri. They're just running into cars.
right.
All right, that's enough bagging on Troy, Missouri.
Yeah. We'll step off that one.
I'll
But
come up with something else to say.
you know, taking that step back around, and we'll touch on my first major relationship and second major relationship and everything here in a minute, because there's definitely a lot of trust issue stuff there. But I want to circle back around to that first step and not necessarily getting confirmation and not knowing if you're still in God's will or not, if you're still operating in what God has asked you to do. And let's look back to that Corinthians love concept here, and one of those things being enduring all things, endures all things.
I hate that word, by the way.
Yeah.
Because the etymology of it is suffering.
Well, let's go long suffering. All right. We'll use the KGV, whatever it is. You know what I'm talking about, the old school one.
Yeah.
All right.
I did a deep dive on the word suffering because I was wondering why suffering even existed. And I found out that the etymology, the design of that word was just enduring.
Right.
And I was just like, ugh. So just like making it, it's supposed like that's just suffering.
Right.
But now it's turned into it's like enduring it in a negative way.
Long suffering. Yep, enduring, long suffering, whatever other versions you want to pull out there. But let's think that through for a minute. And when God gives you a confirmation, which he did through your wife, and there's question marks there and such always, especially when something that crazy happens. And I use the word crazy a little loose there, but
no, it's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. It's outside the norm. All right. When I use the word crazy, I really think of it in my mind as this is outside the norm of expectation. All right. It was way outside the norm of expectation, right? You got your wife coming up to you saying something way left of center, all right, that is exactly what you've prayed about, thought about, thrown out there as, hey, God, you got to confirm this. And, that's confirmation. And let's just say we choose to believe that confirmation came from God. Let's make that assumption just for a moment for the rest of this point of the conversation. And you come out to Troy, Missouri, and you start this business, and you go through all that long suffering. And you're continuing to go through that long suffering. And you're continuing to go through that long suffering. And you don't hear from God when you ask him, am I in the right spot? And you don't hear from God when you say, hey, should I be doing something different? And you don't hear from God when you say, hey, God, I'm running out of steam here. I don't know what to do. All right. And there's a lot of people in that spot. There's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast that feel that same way in, hey, God, I'm not hearing from you. And have you ever stopped to think that maybe you're still on that first step? Maybe you're still in step one. Maybe you're still in the middle of that first step, and step two hasn't presented itself yet because it's not available yet. And God already told you that. God already confirmed that to you. God already said, hey, go to Troy, Missouri, and I'm going to have your wife stand alongside you. I'm going to have your wife confirm this for you. All right. And I'm going to give you a place to land. All right. On that first step. He gave you that first step. All right. Granted, the Troy, Missouri step, I'm not going to rag on it. We already said we were going to stop ragging on Troy, Missouri. It might not be the cleanest first stepping stone to land on, but you've got that first stepping stone, and God doesn't like to repeat himself. God doesn't like to say things over and over. All right. When he says things over and over multiple times in the Bible, all right, it is really getting your attention. All right. But when God confirms something to you and you act on it and you don't necessarily hear from God again, and we choose to love God like we love others, like Second Corinthians, right? Corinthians says that includes the long-suffering piece, and that might mean not necessarily hearing from God on a given subject again, because God's already told us. He's already given you that confirmation. And I'm speaking to you specifically in this scenario right now, and I'm only saying that because we're friends. And the biggest thing, though, is I want to make certain that other people understand that as well, that God says something to us and he confirms it to us, and he might not say anything again for a long time. We might not get those attaboys. We might not get those pats on the butt, all right, to keep us motivated. But that's not what should be motivating us. That's not what should be driving us to stay in it or sit in it for a minute. It's the fact that the God of the universe, the most powerful being that ever existed, that loves us, took enough care and attention on us as an individual to give us that first step. And that's enough for me to sit in that step for as long as it takes to know what the next step is. And if I'm not hearing from God, then I lean on the last thing I heard from God, or I lean on the other things that might not be directly related to my situation I'm asking about, but I lean on the other things that God is telling me about the people around me, or a different situation personally, or I lean on those things that I'm still hearing from God. I might not be hearing from God about this situation that I'm most concerned about. Remember, we talked about earlier that fear and hyper-focused tunnel side of things. I start focusing on the things outside of that one thing that I'm focused on, and it gives me comfort and peace about the thing that I'm not getting answers on. When I'm not getting those answers, I'm not concerned that God doesn't hear me. I'm not concerned that God isn't listening to me or isn't concerned with me and my situation. I lean on the fact that I'm in this situation because God asked me to be here. Because remember, he's a gentleman. He's asking us to do things. He's not forcing us to do things. We're not Jonah, all right? He's not swallowing us up with the whale, all right? Troy is not the whale, all right? He is asking us to do things. And when we take that first step, leaning on that through that long suffering, that can be hard. That can be really hard. But when we don't hear from God in one area of our life, it doesn't mean that God's not speaking to us. It means that we might just have the blinders on and be hyper-focused, like we said, in that fight or flight mode, all right, where we're not able to focus on the other areas that God might be speaking to us, because God can speak to us about the feather hat, all right? He can. I don't think anybody really cares about the feather hat, but he could, all right? And if it's that level, all right, of superficial communication that has to start that relationship between you and God, maybe that's okay. You know, just every relationship grows deeper and deeper as you spend more time with them. Like the more time I spend with Zach, the more time I spend with my friend Zach, the more we get to know each other, the more we get to trust each other, the more we are willing to do for one another. Why can't that be the same understanding between you and God? You know, there's a growth track to my relationship with Zach. There's a growth track to our relationship with God. As we spend more time with Him, as we spend more, moments with Him, and I say moments meaning those special times with Him, times that are actually meaningful, that prompts more meaningful time. That prompts more meaningful interactions. That prompts more trust. And sometimes that is not in the lane of what we're most concerned with at the time. We're most concerned with, where's the second step in this area? Well, hey, I need you to build up step 1 a little bit further before you can reach step 2. All right, this island called step 1 that I've given you, all right, isn't quite big enough or isn't quite set up enough yet for you to be able to take 2 feet off and take that 1 foot off to be able to make that step to step 2. Sometimes the island that is step 1 has to be built up, and it has to be curated and brought to a point to where you can step off and into step 2. And sometimes that's not even so you can step to step 2. Sometimes when you are on step 1 in the island and you're building up that step 1, sometimes it's not about you taking that step to step 2. Sometimes it's about somebody else alongside you taking that step on to that same step 1 that you're on. Building it up as an example, as a curated example of, hey, here's what step 1 can look like. Maybe come join me. All right. I'm not saying God's telling me to tell you to have people join you on step 1, but I'm saying sometimes it's not about you taking the next step. Sometimes it's about you showing the example of what taking that step looked like so others can take that first step too. Or maybe your step 1 is step 6 for somebody else. All right, somebody else is on step 6 or step 5 of that path. And for them to take their next step, they need you to build up that in which God's given you that one little, and in my head, I can just see this little, island stone in the middle of the ocean that are these stepping stones, and the fog is out there and you can't see step 2, and it just requires you to build up that little island that you're on, that God's given you that step before you can either move to step 2, or maybe you have to build up that island big enough so somebody else can take a step from where they're at, whatever stage that they're at, into the stage that you're on, which might be their step 6, 7, so on and so forth. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I was sitting down with Jesse probably about 6 months ago, and he said something to me. He goes, have you ever thought that maybe this isn't all for you to do? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, what if you're just here to plant the seed? And what if someone else gets to watch the tree grow? What if someone else gets to share under the shade of it? And your only job is to plant the seed. And he goes, would you still keep it going? And I said, no. I said, I'm not here to plant trees. I'm here to live under them. And I've wrestled with that a lot, because it's like, that wasn't what God spoke to me. That wasn't what he showed me. So why then would I settle for that? Because now is he changing his mind on what he's got for me in mind? Like, is it just to plant seeds and never see them grow? Because he showed me something grown. And like the whole thing with the podcast is being able to talk about these things. And there was this image that I kept seeing reoccurring of me speaking in front of thousands of people and sharing these stories, sharing these difficult things. And I need to do another solo podcast and share more stuff, because that's really where it came from. But the podcast was the idea of being able, the proverbial thousands of people. Like, nowadays we have all this technology. Like, I don't need a stage and a big auditorium to have my voice heard by thousands of people. It can be heard by thousands of people from the comfort of my basement. And really trying to figure out, like, trying not to force things, like understanding that, am I doing this in my power or am I doing this in God's power? You know, when people say stuff like that, I don't know what to do with it, and I struggle with that big time, because it's like, well, you know, where I get stuck at is this concept of, someone told me once that God begins where you end. And if you believe that you have no end to your capabilities, well, then God's never going to have room to do anything. And it's like, at a certain point, you have to throw the towel in for God to be able to do something in your life. And I'm not willing to throw the towel in yet. And maybe that's probably a huge problem in it. But it's like, I feel like I have to give up in order to let God in. And I'm trying to find that healthy balance of, well, where can I let God in and not feel like I'm giving up? Or, because then that sounds like I'm not willing to relinquish control because I don't trust him. And that, you know, if we want to psychoanalyze it, that's probably where it comes from. But it's like, it's a big struggle, and it makes, the way that you explain it makes perfect sense. It's just understanding it. Like, I try to put everything in analogies of weight loss. It's like trying to convince somebody, like, if you just diet and exercise, you're going to lose weight. And then they get on the scale and there's no weight loss after day 1 and day 2 and day 3. And you're like, just trust the process. But after a certain amount of days of not seeing weight loss on that scale, they're going to be like, F this, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
After a certain amount of days of reaching out to somebody, hey, how are you doing? And getting no response, you're going to stop reaching out to that person. And it's like, well, it comes back to this idea of like, well, don't you want to have this relationship with me? You keep saying that you do, but every time I call you, you don't answer. Well, where's your phone? Do I have the wrong phone number? Like, what's going on here? And that's where I struggle, because when I hear people like you speak so fervently about this, like you are confident in every single word that you just said. And I don't want to say I'm envious of that, but it's like, it's a beautiful thing and I like that. But it's like getting to that point, from a point of no trust to complete trust. Well, it's like, we got to see some steps. So I put trust, you know, I laid all my cards on the table, and I felt like I'm still waiting on the dealer to flip my cards, like, and tell me what's going on here.
Right. What's the situation? What's
Yeah.
I showed like, you mine, show me yours.
How much more trust can I put in you, dude? I dropped everything I was doing. I quit my job. I moved halfway across the country. I'm here. I'm doing it. Now tell me what to do. Like, I did it, but it's like the whole thing, like what you're saying, like maybe you got to build it up more. Well, that's what I've struggled with. Right. You know, I don't know how, because I've reached the end of what I have to offer. And I think so many people get to that place where they, including myself, like where you give it everything that you feel like you have, and you still feel like it's not good enough. And you wonder, like, well, what do I do here now? Well, you got to keep going. And it's so easy for me to tell people that in the concept of weight loss. But when it comes to like the more difficult things in life, it's like, well, how do I keep going here?
Right.
This isn't weight loss.
Right. You know, it's you know, my mind just still has this visual of that little island out in the ocean and the fog and such. And now that you've put weight loss in my ADD head, my one of the artistry squirrels that are in my head has given me the visual of Zach running around on the island. All right, just 3 steps at a time, 3 steps to go around in that circle. And you know, sometimes
that's how it feels.
Yeah, sometimes that island seems small. Sometimes it seems like it's not substantial, but those 3 steps mean something. Those 3 steps it takes to go around the entire island mean something. And I don't know what it means. Sometimes the person on the island doesn't know what it means. That's for God to say. But neither here nor there. I think it comes back to that first thing that we talked about at the very beginning, just talking about that being hyper focused in one area versus available in all areas. And that's really what it comes down to in my life, at least, is I keep referring to the squirrels in my head, but I've got a squirrel in my head that manages any given area of my life, and some squirrels are sitting back in the shade under those trees, because God's rewarded those squirrels with success in a given area. There's some squirrels managing certain areas in my life that are working their absolute little tails off. All right. Let's get real for a minute here. One of the squirrels that's working its tail off right now is lust, pornography, things like that. Staying away from those things. That squirrel is working overtime to follow what God has for my life. All right. It is something that every guy deals with, right? All right. And it's different in every season. And I tell you what, I lived in Florida. I lived in Cocoa Beach, on the beach. All right. Bikinis and boobs everywhere. All right. I never struggled with lust or any of that kind of stuff. All right. There. I moved to Troy, Missouri, and it's a problem. Come on. Really? Really? It seems a little backwards, right? But, that's the way that it works is, God gives us areas to focus on. Like, I didn't choose the lane to focus on lust or stay away from pornography or anything like that. That wasn't something that I wanted to focus on. But God gave me some direction in that area that has furthered my life as a whole. Has nothing to do with my business, has everything to do with my relationship with my wife and the people around me. But it's not what I wanted to focus on, but God put it out there, and that little squirrel is working overtime. And that's the reality of my situation is, it's which squirrel needs attention at the moment. All right. Which one is struggling at the moment? For me, circling back around to that trust side of things, straight out of high school, I went to Jacksonville for college, and the girl of my dreams from high school ended up moving up to Jacksonville with me and staying in my apartment. And then not too long in, I caught my best friend and my fiance on my couch having sex at 3 a.m. I woke up, my fiance wasn't in bed, walked out to the living room, saw what was going on, chased him out into downtown Jacksonville in his underwear, out the front door, and put 3 arm-sized holes in the wall of my apartment instead of my fiance's face at the time. That right there, that's one of those things that breaks trust. All right.
Yeah.
Not too long after that, I guess a little while after that, I end up getting married because, my girlfriend at the time got pregnant. We're being honest here and upfront. It happened, so we did the right thing. Not too long into that, she starts having an emotional affair with her old best friend from high school. And not long after we got divorced, she ended up getting married to him, and they're still married today. And, that's that. Relationships are hard. All right. Nobody said they were ever going to be easy. And sometimes they don't last. And that stinks. When you do everything in your power, when you do everything you think you can do to preserve a relationship, and it ends up perishing, it can be a sad thing. There's mourning all around. I sometimes still miss talking with her parents. There's mourning all around, is what I'm trying to say. Um, you know, there's things that have happened in everybody's life that make them question trust. I can even go back to doctors. All right, about 7, 8 years ago, about the time I got divorced, I was fat, like hella fat. All right, almost 300 pounds fat. And went in and talked with my doctor. Doctor said, "Hey, you need to go on blood pressure medicine." I'm like, "No, I'm not going on blood pressure medicine." He said, "Well, if you lose weight, you won't need to go on blood pressure medicine." So I lost 70 pounds. Went in, talked to the doctor. "Hey, you still need to go on blood pressure medicine." "What are you talking about? I lost 70 pounds. You said if I lost 70 pounds, I wouldn't need to go on blood pressure medicine." "Well, I guess it must be stress related." "Well, thanks. I don't trust you now either." All right. So, well, I'm on blood pressure medicine now. So, there's a lot of things that have happened. In my life, I moved out when I was 15 and couch top for about a year and a half. Wasn't that I was forced to move out. My parents were going through a divorce. It was ugly at home. And, I just stopped spending time at home and just started spending the night at friends' houses. And, eventually, after couch hopping apparently one too many times at a friend of mine's house, her dad came up to me as I'm snoring on the couch while he's trying to watch TV. And he says, "Look, there's a couch in the other room. Just go in there and sleep." And finally, he's like, "You know what? Why don't you just come back and stay there on the couch every night?" I'm like, "Okay, this is great. I got a spot now. At least that counts for something." I remember, not too long after that, I had been couch hopping and just kind of living on my own and doing my own thing for about a year-ish or so, maybe a year and a half. And it's like 10:30 at night, and I'm putting my boots on, and I'm about to go someplace and meet some friends. And this is after I'd been staying there for about a month. And he's like, "Where do you think you're going?" I said, "I'm going out." Like, "You live here now. You're going to abide by the house rules." I'm like, "What? You just gave me a couch. All right. I didn't know I was living here. I didn't know there were rules to this. I haven't had rules in like a year and a half. And you're going to tell me 10:30 is curfew?" No. And we just talked for a minute. And I remember at the end of that, and his name was David Parrish. And it was at the end of that conversation, I realized that he cared for me. He cared about me. He cared about my life. And he wasn't the huggy feely type, but I just remember us hugging and embracing in that moment. And he became another father to me. And I went back inside and went to the couch. He was dad at that point, and I had to listen. But I had this relationship with that family, and that's where I graduated from high school and such. I finished high school and finished senior year living on their couch and such. And I remember it wasn't too long later that the mom of that family passed away at a really young age. And it wasn't too long later after that, David passed away. And I lost those two parental figures that showed me what it meant to have a real family and to be a family, to be a part of a family. And because I didn't know that before. I knew what it was to have family, but I didn't know what it was to be a family and have that kind of relationship. And that I felt like that was taken away from me when they died, one by one. It was, I think, 7 years between, but still just that being taken away. And, those kind of things are hard. Those kind of things break your trust either in a person or trust in God when those kind of monumental things happen. When I was 19, this was April when I was 19, I'm living in downtown Jacksonville. My fiance is living with me. And I am working this fantastic construction job, making really good money, finishing my engineering degree. Everything's going well. I am on the top of me, the tip top of what I can do. I've got it all. I've got everything I ever wanted. And April, when I was 19, the first week in April, my fiance cheats on me in my living room. The second week in April, what happened there? The second week in April, my grandmother passes away. The second week in April, my grandmother passes away. The third week in April is when Mr. David's wife, my other mother, if you will, passed away. And the fourth week in April, I lost my job because of all the other things that I took time off in the month of April. My entire world comes crashing down in 1 month. Everything that I had built up on me is gone. That family feeling completely disrupted. My actual family, my blood family, completely disrupted. Like I said, I grew up next door to my grandmother in that duplex home. She was the one that taught me, scriptures and all sorts of different things, and she was just always there. Gone. My fiance, gone. Best friend, chased out downtown Jacksonville in his underwear, definitely gone. And the job, the thing that I took a lot of pride in because I had that for years, gone. And I'm left with absolutely nothing. One step above not having a pot to piss in. And I remember going back to Cocoa Beach and being in the parking lot of the old church that I went to down there, the Baptist church, and just yelling at God up and down, back and forth, what the hell, explicit this and that. And I am absolutely livid. And God specifically, that was the first time I remember hearing God's voice after I said, hey, maybe I should actually listen to you. Because I had been playing Christian for so long that I thought I was actually a Christian. And I said something there. I was playing Christian long enough to think that I was a Christian, to think that I had actually given my life to God. And in that moment, I realized that, yeah, I was just playing the game. I hadn't actually done it. I hadn't actually given my life over to Christ. I had convinced myself that I was in that place, but I hadn't actually done what it took to get there. I had gotten admission to a place that I thought I was in without actually having the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, after I said, hey, I guess I should do it your way, God says, you got to get baptized. What? I was baptized when I was 11, inappropriately, because I wasn't actually a Christian at the time. But neither here nor there. We're not going to talk about that one. All these people that were in my life for the last, 7, 8, 9 years, thought that I was the practicing perfect Christian. I played that role, and I'm going to go get baptized in front of all of these people again. No, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to, drop my drawers like that. But that's what I did. And that was one of the most nerve-wracking moments of my entire life, is going up on stage in front of all the people that thought I was a perfect Christian and saying, hey, I wasn't. All right, I'm not. I'm never going to be. But I'm willing to legitimately give it over to him and take that next step. And that I'm committing to that in front of everybody here. And that nervous feeling stayed with me all the way until the moment I came up out of the water. And I remember distinctly coming up out of the water and getting embraced by every single person that I thought was going to persecute me at a level that I had never experienced before. And that the people in my life cared for me at a level that I never thought possible. And specifically being embraced by the elders of the church that has seen me grow up, and knowing that this is what love really looks like, and seeing that example of grace and love all in one at a level that just still, even to this day, chokes me up and makes me wonder if I could ever show anybody that level of love and grace. But these things that have happened in my life, yeah, they create a lack of trust. They create a lack of willingness, even trusting somebody or wanting to move forward with a relationship. I don't, what if this person, ends up wrecking my entire life again? Right? What if this doctor gives me bad advice that makes me lose a crap ton of weight and it means nothing? All right. What if, such and such happens and it ends up in being another giant disaster? What if I get close to this person, all right, or I get close to this, pet, and they can't be here any longer? They can't be on this planet any longer. Does that mean I shouldn't be doing it? Does that mean that I shouldn't be attempting? Does that mean that I shouldn't be trying because of that fear? And that's something that every single person has to wrestle with themselves personally on every single situation. And I say wrestle, I really do mean wrestle. If you're not wrestling with your worry, if you're not wrestling with your fear, you're not working at being better. You're not working at being the best version of yourself. When fear comes, knowing that it's not where you're meant to be, it's not where you're meant to stay, and feeling confident that you might not know how to get out of that fear or how to get out of that tunnel vision we talked about earlier, but knowing that you're not supposed to be there and truly believing that there has to be a way out even if you can't see it, maybe that's the first step. Maybe that's the first step, is knowing that even though these situations and circumstances and terrible things that have happened in your life and in my life have created this fear tunnel or this fear focus, knowing that there is option and opportunity outside of that fear-focused tunnel is the first step to choosing to operate outside that tunnel. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, that was very well said, all of it. And I appreciate how open you are about everything that happened, because, those are not fun situations to be in. None of that is. And that really was the driving force behind the idea of the trust, knowing that you had gone through all that stuff and that you can put any amount of faith in anybody to act a certain way and be a certain way. That blew my mind. Memory is something that prevents me from trusting a lot of the time. And and think I hate being Mr. Let me quote something from the Bible, but I think in Isaiah 43 it says, "I am he, the one who blots out your sins and separates you from your transgressions." And I think in Matthew, he says, maybe Matthew 15 or Matthew 18, Peter is asking how many times should I forgive my brother who keeps effing up?
Right.
7 times? And Jesus goes, no, 7 times 70.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this idea of trying to understand, like, how can the all-knowing God actually forget your sins? Like, come on now. That makes no sense. But we can't. We have to live with these memories still, and they completely shape every decision we make moving forward. Is the memory of certain experiences. The body recognizes it, and it does it to protect us and keep us safe and protected from anything. But just that you have managed to step back into situations and make yourself vulnerable to certain people and certain things while having the past and the history that you've had with people, it blows my mind. It's in some sort of enigma that I just can't quite grasp, and that was really where I wanted to talk about. I can't even put into words because it still just doesn't even make sense to me. The more that I think about it, it makes even less sense to me. It's like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Well, fool me 3 times. Like, what? What are we even talking about here? Like, how do we even get past that point? So, if you want to keep going, we can. I just got to pee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get better chairs for in here.
It's not. That's not it.
No, I want to redo the whole design of everything in here. I'd like it to be more on a couch, more relaxed. Because, we're talking about serious things a lot of time. And, when I first started this, I wasn't 100% sure if it was going to be all, serious conversations. But, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. It's like I'm past the surface level on things.
Right.
And especially when it comes to topics like trust, it's like, in the church, there's so many platitudes that people use, trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understandings. And it's like, look, trust is this idea that I'm going to rely on you to follow through in something that you have committed to, or I'm going to put a certain amount of control in your hands and expect that you are going to treat that the same way if it was yours as if it was mine. And I think that concept is so difficult, especially when it comes to something ethereal like God, because you're putting trust in something that, like the wind, you can feel it, you can't see it, you see the evidence of it because you see it moving the leaves in the trees, but you can't grasp it.
Right.
And it's never really made a whole lot of sense to me. It's never really been one of those things that has made much sense because, I don't know, everything in my mind is so skeptical and so cautious because of, who knows? That's why I'm in counseling. And I'm always trying to figure those things out. I'm sure there's multiple events that lead to that, but it's like, I don't trust myself even because it's like, well, I've made so many bad decisions that I thought were the right decisions and they didn't work out. So, well, how do I even trust myself? Well, you don't need to trust yourself. You need to trust God. Okay, well, I put faith in God to get me to certain places and I feel like it ran out, or maybe I made the wrong decision, or maybe it was actually something I thought of, and then you start asking all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So to hear that you have managed to just to even something as simple, and it's not that simple, it's very complex, but just to even hear that you're giving a relationship another shot after having 2 women break the trust that you gave them. When you enter into a relationship with someone, and especially in the context of marriage, essentially what you're telling that person is, I see myself a certain way, and I'm going to let you see me that way.
Right.
I'm going to let you inside of who I am as you have special access. And when that trust is violated for any reason, it becomes very difficult to then A, continue in those relationships, but B, like, open yourself up to the next person. Because there's that mechanism in your brain now that, oh, well, you can't trust. So you almost have to have this supernatural thing happen where it's like it can unlock and override that protection mechanism. And you've managed to do that, and I see it, and that's where I'm still like, I hear everything you're saying. I know it's all true. But how do I make that practical to my life, or how does the listener make that practical to their life? Because it's just such a unique concept that even when things don't go the way that you expect them to go, that you can continue to trust in the process.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's get real. Let's get tangible here for a minute. All right, let's show me your hand. All right, that hand's on this table. We believe that hand is there because we can see that hand. You believe it's there because, well, one, it's attached to you. All right, but two, you've used it before. You know it's real because you've put your hands on things, right? I think we can all agree that all of the questions about whether that hand is real or not, within reason, questions that are within reason. We're not in the Matrix here. We're just taking that. We're taking that off the table. We don't have enough time for that.
You're right.
So, but taking the Matrix off the table, I think we can all agree that the tangibleness of something proves reality of it, right? You talked about the wind. Yes, it's not tangible, but we see evidence of it, but that still leaves skepticism in some people's minds. The roundness of the earth. But that hand there, that hand in front of you, as you're looking at it, and you realize that these hands have done things. These hands, you just recently cut a tree down in your backyard, right?
Yeah.
Sadness. We burnt that tree together. That was a good fire.
It was a good fire.
But, you've done things with your hands, all right? You've achieved things with your hands. And did the hands do the thinking about how to cut down that tree? Did the hand, decide that tree was dead and rotting and dried up on the inside, and decide that, hey, we're going to go Paul Bunyan on this thing? The hand didn't make that decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The hand didn't all of a sudden decide, hey, we're going to find an axe or a hatchet or whatever you use to cut this thing down.
Saw.
Did you?
Handsaw.
A handsaw. Nice, because I was borrowing his electric tools at the moment. So that's what friends are for. But the hand didn't decide to do that. It just merely took the action that Zach decided was appropriate for that tree. Zach made the decision on, hey, this tree needs to come down, and the world is going to be better for it. The hand didn't get a choice in that. The hand didn't get an option, but it still took the appropriate actions that Zach. I wanted to call you Jack Beanstalk. Sorry.
Appropriate.
But it still took the actions that Zach said were appropriate. And, those things that happen, that's because Zach thought this tree needed to come down. And I know we're talking about a tree here at the moment, but where I want to circle this around to tangibly is we make decisions all the time. We make decisions all the time. Me as Phil, Zach as Zach, you as you, whoever you are listening to this, you made a decision to listen to this podcast. If you've made it this far, you've made a decision to keep listening to this podcast, which is awesome. But you made that decision. I'm not trying to say that God told me, all right, to do X, Y, Z, or God told Zach to cut down that tree. or even God told you to listen to this podcast. You might have just been thumbing through YouTube and landed on it. All right. That's a possibility. And so not every single thing that we do is directed by God. All right. And what that means and what that tells me is that God's given me and you as the listener, you, Zach, and you as the listener, a set of skills and discernment to make decisions yourself, to take action yourself, to do things that have no, I'm not going to say no bearing, but have no directive directly from God. We get to make decisions and do things because we have free will. That is part of how our lives work, which means that God's given us, and this is a prerequisite that you have to have, that I have the prerequisite understanding that God has given me a set of skills. He's given me a set of abilities. He's given me talents to do certain things and to be successful in certain things. And not all of those things are 100% contingent on God giving me the roadmap every single time. I can do things myself without God specifically giving me the go-ahead. All right, I'm not saying that I ask for God's direction on every single decision that I make. What I am saying is that I know that even if I don't hear from God, and it is something that is on the Phil can handle it spectrum, which that spectrum's different for every single person, all right, on what circumstances we should be consulting God on and what circumstances, hey, whether I need to go upstairs and go pee like we just did a few minutes ago, I'm not consulting God on whether I need to go pee. My bodily function said, hey, you got to go take a piss. All right, let's take a pause, go take a piss.
That was a God-ordained piss.
It was
before the foundations of the earth began. That was planned.
Well, I don't know what sect of the church that understanding is in, but
I believe it's in Psalms.
Yeah.
So,
that's not what I want anybody to take from these conversations is. There are certain things that God wants us to consult with Him on. There's certain things that God has planned for our lives. But there comes a certain point in your life it's not the birds and the bees. There comes a certain point, though, where you have control over what you are going to do. And I guess the big difference here is those hands, those tangible hands that God has given me. I'm making the choice to believe that God gave me those hands to do things, even if it's myself. All right, I'm choosing to believe that God gave me this squirrel-filled brain to make certain decisions myself. I'm choosing to believe that God gave me this crazy journey church family to be a part of. And in those things, there's decisions and actions and things that happen within those bounds that, to be honest, I don't expect God to give me direction and instruction on. I know that God has given me a set of skills that let me handle things. And the more I listen to God in the bigger things and the things that He does talk to me about, the more the actions that I take in and of my own free will are in line with what He has shown me in the other areas of my life. But it all started with truly believing that God gave me a set of skills and hands to make decisions from here to here, from my brain to my own hands. All right, I have that ability to make a decision myself without God intervening or specifically telling me what to do, and then to take that action myself. That is part of my free will. But I choose to believe that God gave me the ability to do that. And without that first bit of faith, because this all comes down to faith, all right? There's no way around that, all right? Romans tells us that is the path, all right? That is the understanding. It starts with faith, all right? And the faith has to start someplace, but that's one of the places that my faith starts, is my faith, and this comes across bad, but it's truly what I believe. My faith, although starts with God, the next thing, my faith is in me and the skills that God has given me to be able to handle situations that come up, even when God's not specifically instructing me in how to proceed. So, and that might be viewed as pious, or some other Greek word that we can choose of self-bloated whatever. But I don't see it as that. I see it as, look, I have the strength to handle whatever comes at me because God's given me a set of gifts to handle things without me needing to be babysat.
Yeah.
So hopefully that strikes home for somebody.
Yeah, it does. I think that's actually a great place for us to kind of set this one in the books for now, and maybe we can come back at another time and get into more things, because at the end of the day, this is going to be a lot for people to kind of walk through, but also at the same time, that's a good thing to end it at, is like taking responsibility for the gifts that you have been given.
Right.
And trusting that you were given those gifts for a reason.
That's it. That's what it really comes down to, is we've all been given gifts. Everybody's gifts are different. And just knowing that at the end of it all, this does come down to a faith thing. Trust has to come down to faith. When we talk about trust and faith, they go hand in hand, just like you said a moment ago, Zach. It's trusting, having faith that this person is not going to treat me like the last person did. Faith and trust go hand in hand.
Yeah, I hate the F word.
I know. All right, dude.
Hey, everybody. I appreciate you sticking around if you are still watching this video. I appreciate every single one of you for every minute that you spend listening to these things. I wish I could say that I'm doing it for you. I'm really not. I'm doing this because I feel like it's something that, regardless of how mad I might be at God, regardless of where I might be in my faith walk, I feel like I was called to do something like this, and I have to follow through with it regardless, because it's like I know that it's bigger than me. And I'm really not sure what that means yet, but there's something bigger than me, and I just want to be a part of it. So I hope that you continue to tune into these conversations. Phil, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. You're a busy guy. You've been traveling all over for the last few weeks, so thank you for sitting down with me for a couple hours. And more to come.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Take care, everyone.